And in 2024, they're predicting that almost 1,700 people will die each day, and that's like almost 612,000 for the year, um, which is their numbers. But you can even break it down further because 1,700 people a day comes out to about 70 people per hour in the United States are dying from cancer. And many of these folks are dying from a combination of the toxic poisonous treatment given, as well as together with the tumor. So the big improvement in reducing cancer deaths has come from a prevention, very, very little from any new technologies, any new therapies. And that's mainly because the therapies that are developed are based on the idea that cancer is a genetic disease. And if the theory is incorrect, then we're not going to move the needle in any significant way in reducing death. So this I consider one of the greatest, probably if not one of the greatest tragedy in the history of medicine, where we have a clear understanding of what causes cancer, what drives, but we're from confirmation bias and all these ideological viewpoints, we're not implementing what we need to do to drop that death rate. Well, it's called, in our world of managing cancer, it's called ketogenic metabolic therapy.
Hmm.
But you can prevent cancer as well doing that. All it is essentially lowering the blood sugar and allowing ketones to elevate naturally. You can also take maybe some ketone supplements, but that's why, because the diet and discussions of diet become so ambiguous for one person versus the next. Some people are vegans, carnivores, pescatarians, Mediterranean diets, all this kind of stuff. What is the common? How do we exploit this? And we developed, as I mentioned earlier, the glucose ketone index calculator,
Yeah.
which allows someone to lower their blood sugar and elevate their ketones, regardless of what kind of religious or background you may have, cultural and religious restrictions. Anybody can do this, and what it is a way to enhance and increase your health with keeping your mitochondria as healthy as they possibly can be. Well, I think that the prevention, if we're talking about cancer, people don't want to get who feels that they need to have cancer, get it to be better. No, I think we can prevent it by exercise and maintaining reduced glucose and elevated ketones. That keeps your mitochondria healthy. If your mitochondria are healthy, it's very difficult to get reduce stress, reduce all the kinds of things that cause dysregulated mitochondrial function. And in my papers that I've written, everything I have to, we publish open access papers so people can read our press metabolic therapy. People can read how cancer cannot be a genetic disease. People can read all of the evidence that I don't have time to give you the nuts and bolts of what I'm talking about. But it's on the web. Just put my name in, just say, what is he publishing? And then you can use that for your own health and improvement.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Your Health Matters. My name is Carl Sterling. I'm pleased to be your host. You know, a lot of times we have certain rituals we go through before we get into the meat and potatoes of the episode. But today, we're not going to do any of that. And I'll tell you why, because we have a special guest with us today, somebody who I've been studying here for quite some time, and he's doing amazing, groundbreaking work. His name is Dr. Thomas Seyfried. He's a pioneering researcher in the field of cancer metabolism and the author of Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. His groundbreaking work has transformed how we understand the origins and treatment of cancer, focusing on non-toxic metabolic therapies. This is really exciting. So I am honored to have him here with me today to share his insights on the future of cancer treatment and how we can better approach this complex disease. Welcome, Dr. Seyfried. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, Carl, and thank you for having me on your program.
Oh, my pleasure. Believe me, it's my pleasure totally. I have been, following you for quite some time and really fascinated by the work you're doing. And I know when I watch, you read different things and watch different interviews with you. You were doing a lot in the arena of epilepsy, all the way back to even Yale, right? You've been at Boston College for 30 something years.
Yeah,
And
I've been now for almost 40 years, and I was at Yale for 9 years in the Department of Neurology before I came to Boston College.
okay. So, when we define cancer, I don't think that the definition of cancer is necessarily rocket science. It seems to be an irregular growth of, well, maybe you want to do it, not me, you're the expert. But if we define cancer very, very succinctly, what is it?
You're right. It is quite simple. It's the definition of cancer is cell division out of control or dysregulated cell growth. That's it. That's what the definition of cancer is.
All right. Thank you for that. That just made it so easy. So what I find really fascinating, and with my son being a physician, as emergency room training is his thing, but a lot of research and he's Ph.D. I'm totally bragging for just a minute. But I've learned so much from him and a lot of the other experts who, let's say, they're thinking outside the box, like you are, thinking forward and really looking at, the causation of a lot of things. It seems that the current state of things, the medical world is looking at cancer, or I should say, still looking at cancer as being largely genetic, when in fact it might not be so much genetic. Maybe it's more of a metabolic disease. And that's to me, I don't want to have you run with it on that one, because can you describe to us what that means, this whole metabolic dysfunction in relation to cancer?
Well, I think you have to first look at what the National Cancer Institute, NCI, calls cancer, and essentially all cancer centers throughout the United States and the world, for that matter, they refer to cancer as a genetic disease. It's right on their website. And what does that mean? It means that mutations in the nucleus lead to cells dividing out of control, which is essentially what cancer is. So, and on the National Cancer Institute website, they say cancer is 100 different diseases, all differing in genetic background, mutations, and all this kinds of things, making it an extremely complicated disorder. And the therapies that we have currently use these immunotherapies, CAR T, immunotherapy, PD-L1 kinds of immunotherapies, are all based on being a genetic disease. The issue, of course, is that if cancer is not a genetic disease, then what can it be? And I'll tell you that the new information is coming that shows that we now find some tumors that have no mutations. When you look at them with very deep genetic sequencing, there are some, even though the same technology finds thousands of mutations in the tumor of one person, they might not find this so there are some cancers that do not have the mutations. And then they kind of broke it down and said, well, not all mutations are leading to dysregulated cell growth, but we have recognized only some of these, and they're called driver mutations. Okay. And they're the ones that drive the dysregulated cell growth. And now, so people said, okay, well, we have passenger mutations that don't do too much. They're there in many of the tumors, but the real mutations that cause the dysregulated cell growth are driver mutations. So within the last few years now, we're seeing dozens of papers and many studies finding all of these driver mutations present in normal tissues of people that don't have cancer, healthy people, older, younger people. You look at their tissue and you do a genetic sequence and you find all these so-called cancer driver mutations, and the people are perfectly healthy with no tumor. So this is a massive challenge to somatic mutation theory when you have some cancers with no mutations and other cancers with driver mutations that don't show dysregulated growth. And then, of course, the nuclear mitochondrial transfer experiments are the nail in the coffin, where you take the nucleus of the to a new cytoplasm with normal mitochondria, and you get regulated growth. And if you take the nucleus of the normal cell and put it into the cytoplasm of the tumor cell, you get dysregulated growth. All of these are devastating. Inconsistency, the general consensus that cancer is a genetic disease. It's not. You have to be a hopeless ideologue to think that cancer is a genetic disease. So what is it? And we and others have shown that all cancers ferment glucose and glutamine, the sugar and glucose and the amino acid glutamine, and they cannot burn fatty acids or ketones. And this goes back to which we have confirmed, and we have extended his original findings, the famous German biochemist from the last century.
If you want to learn how to implement the ketogenic diet and the Press Pulse protocol into your cancer management, just visit school.com/keto for cancer, the new community by our research analyst Johnny Rockermeyer. Within this new community platform, you can connect with other patients and learn from their experiences. You can also just search through the posts other members have already made. You will have access to our classroom section as well, which provides practical advice and tools for the best results. These sections cover all parts of the Press Pulse protocol that you should implement. Starting with the General Scientific Concepts by Dr. Thomas Seyfried, we will show you how to start the ketogenic diet, including which foods to choose and which to avoid. Additionally, we prepared a list of doctors specialized in metabolic therapy, as well as details about glutamine inhibition and hyperbaric oxygen protocols. So, take a look around at school.com/keto for cancer.
So we now know that all tumors suffer from the same problem. The problem is they're driven by a non-oncology. The mutations are largely irrelevant to this. They're red herrings. People are focusing on the wrong thing. But we can't find tumors that can survive without glucose and glutamine. So, and they can't switch to fatty acids or ketones because their mitochondria are dysfunctional. So this then describes how you manage cancer. You simultaneously take away the fuels and you transition them to nutritional ketosis, and you should be able to manage the disorder without toxicity.
Oh man, that right there is just a goldmine of information. When we come back from the first break here, I'm really fascinated by this whole fermentation subject and some of the history behind that and what's actually happening, because I'm not sure I understand it completely yet, but I'm beginning to. So thank you so much, Dr. Seyfried, for joining us. You're listening to Your Health Matters here on the iHeart Network. It's great to have you with us. We'll be back after this short break. All right, we are back with Dr. Thomas Seyfried. And I got to tell you, man, this is all fascinating to me. One of the buzzwords these days, it seems anyways, is mitochondria health, mitochondrial dysfunction, mitochondria, it's everything, it's everywhere. And, ATP, how important it is to have healthy mitochondria and be producing the energy we need. And so hopefully my segue here actually makes sense. This idea of fermentation, if I'm thinking correctly here, it refers to a metabolic process where cancer cells rely on, let's see, aerobic glycosis. Am I on track here?
Yeah, it's aerobic glycolysis. It's the
I'm so sorry. Yeah, glycolysis, also known as the Warburg effect. Is that right?
Well, it's a term that's poorly understood by the majority of people in the cancer field. It's a term they like to throw around, but they use it to say the cancer cells continue to produce energy through a non-oxidative mechanism, even in the presence of 100% oxygen. This is a very abnormal, it would be an extremely abnormal situation.
Okay, so let's I'd like to get down to really like the cause. If we get down to the cause, which I think you touched on previously, except I want to try to unpack or break it down into something real simple here. This abnormal cellular growth or splitting or whatever's going on with cancer, if it's not genetic, there's something going wrong. We can have a mitochondria issue, a metabolic issue. Um, what would be a great preventative, let's say a preventative measure, and what's a great therapeutic measure for dealing with cancer? Let's say preventing it and dealing with it. I'm going to let you run with that.
Yeah, well, let's talk about prevention. It's very difficult to get cancer if the mitochondria are healthy. So all cancers arise from a chronic disruption of oxidative phosphorylation, which means energy using oxygen. That's why you're breathing right now. Every time we take a breath in, there's oxygen in there. And that oxygen then is used to drive energy through what we call oxidative phosphorylation, which is the production of ATP using oxygen as an acceptor. So, and every exhale breath, we blow out CO2 and moisture, water, and those are the end products. The end products of oxidative phosphorylation are CO2 and water, and the CO2 comes from the foods that we eat, the carbon in the foods that we eat. So that's normal respiration. Cancer cells are very, very different. They have a chronic disruption of that process. And I say chronic because acute disruption, like cyanide blocked oxidative phosphorylation and you die instantly. But cancer cells chronically, they have a chronic disruption of that process, which is closely coupled to a protracted increase in non-oxidative energy, which are these ancient pathways of fermentation. And this is how all cells lived on our planet before oxygen came into the 8 billion years ago.
Thank you. I'm interrupting 1 second because that's something I've heard you say before. So I want to go back. First of all, that's fascinating. That's before oxygen entered our atmosphere, we had fermentation.
That's because there was no oxygen. So how are these cells dividing? And most of those cells at that time from fossil records had dysregulated cell growth. So they would grow wildly, unbridled proliferation until in their environment were depleted, and then these cells would die. So the cancer cell is simply using those ancient pathways. And as long as the fermentable fuels in the tumor microenvironment are there, which are glucose and glutamine, those cells are very difficult to kill. So they're living on these ancient fermentation pathways, even in the presence of oxygen, making this an unusual kind of a situation. So we know that, and that mitochondria have lost their ability to produce sufficient energy through oxidative phosphorylation. And you're right, when you talk about mitochondria, they control the destiny of the cell. They control the differential quiescent state of the cell. When that organelle becomes corrupted, it now loses control of the cell, falling back on these ancient pathways of dysregulated cell growth. So the mitochondrion is the controller of the destiny, not only of our cells, but exists because it's the second law of thermodynamics that eventually kills us, disorder. We eventually collapse. We have no longer energy. If you live a normal lifestyle, if you live a normal lifespan, not of course from accidents or injuries or things like this.
Sure.
We just peter out, and that's because our mitochondria are no longer capable of maintaining cell electrical potential across cells. We reach equilibrium, which is death. So cancer is like an accelerated process of disorder. As the fermentation fuels are present, these things will grow out of control, and they're very difficult to kill.
Yeah. Oh, man. So ATP, I just want to go back to that. We talk about that all the time here in my clinic because it's one of our energy systems, adenosine triphosphate, right? So when you're doing a set of 15 or 12 reps and you're feeling that burn on the last 2, 3, or 4, and you get in a good, leg extension, whatever, working on the quads, could be anything. We need to take a break. optimally, we want to take a break for a certain amount of time, depending upon the phase of training they're in, let the ATP get back into the muscles to the degree it can, and then do another set. But if we don't have healthy mitochondria, the ATP production is going to be compromised if I'm thinking right.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah, it will be. But you have to, if you don't replace the energy from, you don't replace ATP from phosphorylation, you have to get the energy from another source. And if you exercise your muscles excessively, the energy overwhelms the ability of oxygen to do this. So they'll produce lactic acid, which is lactic fermentation, which is energy. You're still producing significant energy without oxygen because the muscles are so active you can't get enough oxygen in there. But as soon as you stop exercising, the lactic acid goes into the bloodstream, goes to the liver, and liver converts it back into glucose, which goes back to the muscle to generate the ATP. So that was the Cori cycle. Sol and Gertie Cori got the Nobel Prize for that back in the 1940s.
Love this stuff. Love this stuff. Let's see. Actually, we need to go to break in about a minute. So when we come back, folks, I'd like to talk more about what's going on here with all this cellular stuff and mitochondria health, dysfunction, and good function. I think it's really interesting, Doctor, that, well, actually sad, we're going to leave on this note here until the next segment is, sadly, we'll segue into this at some point. We have something like 1,700 people a day in this country dying from cancer. And it didn't used to be like that. So it's almost like a epidemic proportion. I'd like to touch on that when we come back. So with us, we have Dr. Thomas Seyfried. And his book is called Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. I highly recommend. Get on Amazon, get on whatever, buy it. It's a fantastic resource. We'll be back after this short break. Okay, we're back with Dr. Thomas Seyfried, the author of Cancer as a Metabolic Disease. Doctor, this is one of the sad things we're reporting is about 1,700 people per day, 1,700 people per day dying of cancer. Now, I'm 63 years old. It seems to me when I was 50 years ago, maybe, I know cancer was here and there. We heard about it, but it seems like, and there are more people now too than there were 50 years ago. But the percentage of people with cancer seems to have risen greatly. I don't have stats, but let's address this 1,700 people passing away per day. What's happening? What's going on? Why is this happening?
Yeah, well, those numbers are cataloged by the American Cancer Society. So we come out with the big cancer statistics and deaths and all this kind of stuff. And in 2024, they're predicting that almost 1,700 people will die each day, and that's like almost 612,000 for the year. Which is their numbers. But you can even break it down further because 1,700 people a day comes out to about 70 people per hour in the United States are dying from cancer. And many of these folks are dying from a combination of the toxic poisonous treatment given as well as together with the tumor. Because a lot of folks, when they're first diagnosed, they're actually not too unhealthy, but sometimes they do have type 2 diabetes, obesity, and this kind of thing. The biggest, and of course, when you listen to the statistics and enormous progress in reducing the death from cancer, but that all became because of the anti-smoking campaigns of the 1990s, made smoking health risk, secondhand smoke, and all this. So peer pressure from the city put pressure on smoking, and of course smoking was linked to lung cancer as well as a variety of other cancers as well as other diseases. So the big improvement in reducing cancer deaths has come from a prevention, very, very little from any new technologies, any new therapies. And that's mainly because the therapies that are developed are based on the idea that cancer is a genetic disease. And if the theory is incorrect, then we're not going to move the needle in any significant way in reducing death. So this I consider one of the greatest, probably if not one of the greatest tragedy in the history of medicine, where we have a clear understanding of what causes cancer, what drives, but we're from confirmation bias and all these ideological viewpoints, we're not implementing what we need to do to drop that death rate significantly. And as I said, once cancer becomes recognized as a disorder driven by a fermentation metabolism, we should be able to drop the death by at least 50% in 10 to 15 years, depending on, we have to retrain people and we have to just tell them that this is something very different than what they thought it was. So like a major advance, we shouldn't have to be treating people with these toxic poison surgical mutilations and all the crazy stuff. This is medieval stuff. It's done by people who either don't know or understand the nature of the disorder, or who refuse to understand the nature of the problem. So yes, we can prevent. It's interesting because metabolic therapy, ketogenic metabolic therapy, is used not only to manage cancer, but it also can be used to prevent cancer. Mm-hmm. So at Boston College, I developed, my students and I developed the glucose ketone index calculator, which measures the ratio of blood sugar to ketones in the blood. And that can be a way to prevent cancer, because if you can keep the blood sugar low and the ketones elevated, in other words, putting your body into the Paleolithic lifestyle like our ancestors who did not have cancer in the Paleolithic period, you're certainly prevented. And then if you do have cancer, the first thing what is done is you bring the patient back into this low glucose ketone index, and then the tumor cells become extremely vulnerable to the utilization of even some of the chemo drugs. Can be used in very small quantities. Even all the things we're using can be used in very small quantities, very low dosages, and have massive effects without collateral toxicity. So it's interesting. We have all the tools to manage cancer effectively. We're just not using it correctly based on an incorrect theory of what the disease is. And until the NCI changes and realizes that it's a metabolic disease, I don't think we're going to see any drop significantly anywhere until the field recognizes what we can do and how we can manage this disorder without toxicity.
Yeah, well, to put things into a perspective for some of us who like numbers like I do, we've been on for just over 30 minutes, which means that approximately 35 people, if we go with 1,700 people passing away a day, approximately 35 people have passed away since we started talking. Almost unbelievable. It's mind-boggling. So preventatively speaking, then, it seems like maybe exercise might be good for us. Keeping our blood sugar in a healthy zone is good for us. Not eating processed foods and too much sugar, and maybe eating optimal amounts for us instead of binging out and eating way too much all the time, because we'll feed ourselves good stuff, feed our cells, our mitochondria, and keep moving, which is another problem. I heard you say in another interview, in fact, I was sitting in my car in a traffic jam when I heard it. Here we are sitting in our cars in traffic jams. Whoa, that's me right now. But at least I get out and I move and I do things. But it's true. There's so much sedentary time. So where do we go next, doctor? What's next on in your thought process here?
Well, right now, you're right. What's causing the cancer is our diet and lifestyle issues. We were made to move all the time for a Paleolithic, hundreds of thousands of years as a species. We were tracking down animals and killing them, and we had to use a lot of energy. And there weren't Dunkin' Donuts on every corner or delicatessens. Not to say that we wouldn't have wanted. That's our desire. We like sweet things. We like this. We have an obesity epidemic, which is now replacing type 2 diabetes. This is a clear example of our evolutionary path. The obesity epidemic is evolution in action. Our ancestors were storing energy like crazy to survive. They didn't have the massive amounts of high carbohydrate energy that we have. And the obesity epidemic is clearly telling us we are the descendants of folks that lived thousands of years ago who really had a biology to store energy. And now we have so much highly processed carbohydrates, which are foods that can last on a shelf for long periods of time, as opposed to things that are natural. So processed carbs, minimal exercise, stress, bad sleep, all kinds of disruptive activities put us at risk for dysregulated cell growth. It's not that complicated.
No. And on a side note here, I not that long ago talked with an undertaker who told me, I don't remember the numbers. This is pretty morbid, literally. The amount of embalming fluid needed these days compared to 100 years ago is a lot less because we're fairly well preserved, many of us. So there's something to think about. Whoa. So when we come back, I'd love to talk more about this ketogenic, the dietary part of things. I think that's really fascinating, can be a really good thing for our listeners to learn. So we are with Dr. Thomas Seyfried, author of Cancer as a Metabolic Disease, an amazing, groundbreaking book, and his work is groundbreaking. We'll be back here on Your Health Matters in just a couple of minutes. And we're back with Dr. Thomas Seyfried. And this has been really informative, man. And I'm so excited to have you here. I'd love to talk about the ketogenic aspect of things. Like you said before we went to break, processed carbs, sugars, processed foods, they're everywhere. It's a subject of a lot of conversations I have on the show. I think that a lot of us, I'm guilty. These days I don't crave sweets. I just want to eat potato chips. But I'll go a couple of weeks without them, and then I've got to dive into a small bag because I'm just going to have them. But for the most part, I've gotten rid of all that, really crummy processed stuff, and I do feel a lot better. But let's talk about dietary wise. What can we do to fight cancer? And it seems like it should be a no-brainer. We were paleo way back, our ancestors were. Let's talk about this.
So yes, and also when you have cancer, when you're in a ketonic state where glucose is low and ketones are elevated, we notice that the delivery of drugs to the is so much better and easier. Yeah. Ketones enhance the health and vitality of our mitochondria. It's called, my late good friend Richard Veach from the NIH and George Cahill, they wrote a paper, ketones as super fuel. What it does is it enhances the health and vitality of your normal cells to an extended level. Brain focus, brain metabolism, muscle metabolism, all of these things increase tremendously. So we developed ketones so that anybody can know when they're in this nutritional state of ketosis. And that can be done with any diet but people say, oh, it's hard for me to do this and hard for me to do that. I can't eat this and I can't eat that. We go zero carb for 14 days, and then you can switch into water-only fasting, and then you can manage it with various foods that will not elevate glucose too much. My good friend Dominic D'Agostino, he's always in one of these ketonic states. Yeah, he's Paleolithic man.
He's cool
in modern society. So so it's not impossible to do, but it's not easy. And I want to emphasize, and I agree with the potato chips. Every now and then take advantage of all the technology that we've developed over the eons to enjoy a pizza or even a jelly donut. But if you're existing on this stuff, then you're cancer bait, and you get all neuropsychiatric problems, and you get all kinds of other problems with this. But people need to know that. I think it's the knowledge base. Once you understand, and then once you get the meter, you can buy it from Amazon, Keto Mojo, and you can do free Libras and all these kinds of things. People start collecting the data from each person on themselves, and then they know, especially cancer patients, it's essential. But for the regular guy who wants to stay healthy, he can do this.
So that meter, you're talking about the glucose ketone index calculator?
Yeah, it's a meter, like it's a blood glucose meter. You take a prick of your finger and you get a drop.
Wow. You can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, you can buy it on Amazon. It's called Keto Mojo, and they sell the
Oh,
consumables, so everybody can have that. And of course, the technology is improving. So we have the free Libre glucose monitor on your arm, but it doesn't do
oh,
ketones.
wow. This is so good.
It
I
doesn't
told you on the
ketone
break
yet.
you're a genius. I'm telling you, Doc, you're a genius. I appreciate your genius on my show here. And the fact you created this thing and I didn't know it was available. I'm going to look it up right
Well,
away.
wait a minute. I didn't make the Keto Mojo, but the Keto Mojo as our calculator into the Mojo.
But it's based on what you
And
did make. Yes.
yeah, but we
Okay.
couldn't patent that. You can't patent a mathematical formula, but it's certainly
Darn it.
selling a lot of the Mojos. So I'm happy
Okay.
that people are selling Mojos, but I don't have any part in that. That's
Well, yeah, I'm sorry if I said
you
anything
know,
I shouldn't have there, but the bottom line is you put together this glucose ketone index calculator. So in the Keto Mojo,
yeah.
you can measure this stuff. This is
Yeah.
epic. This is so important. This is so important. So data is king for me. I need to measure everything I can possibly measure with my people here, right? So this is another thing for the list.
Well, Carl,
Now,
listen. You got to ask how many people in our modern society would like to go back to the Paleolithic period of existence, because the GKI will do that, and then all of a sudden you're going to say, "Oh, well, I don't, it's great and wonderful, but I prefer modern
yeah,
diet lifestyle." It's not that easy, but you have the quantitative measure to do it today if you want.
sure. Sure. I love that. So just to clarify for listeners, we talk about mitochondria often on this show. And in case you're not familiar with what it is, I'm just going to give you a real simple thing. It's the power pack of every cell in our body. It needs to be high function. If it's not functioning high, neither is the cell. And if you get enough of them not functioning well, you're not going to feel good, and there's some problems that are going to happen. So mitochondria is key. I mean, without it, we're not going to be here. So, doctor, let me ask you this. In the last 2 minutes we have here, what would be your ultimate, let's say, takeaway message
Well,
for people to think about? What should they be thinking and doing?
Well, I think that the prevention, if we're talking about cancer, people don't want to get who feels that they need to have cancer, get it to be better. No, I think we can prevent it by exercise and maintaining reduced glucose and elevated ketones. That keeps your mitochondria healthy. If your mitochondria are healthy, it's very difficult to get reduce stress, reduce all the kinds of things that cause dysregulated mitochondrial function. And in my papers that I've written, everything I have to, we publish open access papers so people can read our press metabolic therapy. People can read how cancer cannot be a genetic disease. People can read all of the evidence that I don't have time to give you the nuts and bolts of what I'm talking about. But it's on the web. Just put my name in, just say, what is he publishing? And then you can use that for your own health and improvement.
I love it. Boy, I'd love to have you back sometime to talk more if you're up for it. I really appreciate all the great work you're doing, doctor. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and just so listeners, again, cancer as a metabolic disease is the name of Dr. Seyfried's book. You can get it on Amazon. Any other place they should get your book? I know Amazon's one place.
Yeah, Amazon is probably, well, you can buy it from, I give them a discount from John Wiley Press, who's the publisher of the book. And it's also important to realize that the research that we do here at Boston College is largely supported from private foundations and philanthropy, either Travis Christofferson's Foundation for Cancer Metabolic Therapy or through our cancer biology at Boston College. If you go on my webpage, there's a donation button. Push.
Okay, what's that webpage? What's that website address?
It's the biology department at Boston College, and it has our faculty. And then when you come to my picture there and my name, and you look at my profile, there's a donation button there.
Great. I'll tell you what, I'll put a link in the description on all listening and watching platforms here, so you'll have that, folks. Yeah. Doctor, thanks a million for joining me. I appreciate it so much.
Well, thank you very much, Carl. It was nice to be here.